We're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, we're going to discuss several very important political updates that have been published recently. According to information we have, Belgium will transfer F-16s to Ukraine and allocates 20 million euros. This is reported by Ukrainian media, citing the head of the Belgian Foreign Minister Maxim Prevot. It is noted that Kyiv will receive the aircraft as early as September, so very soon, and the money will go towards infrastructure restoration. Another important piece of news is coming from Germany. According to information we have, Germany is discussing sending troops to Ukraine after the conflict ends. That was stated by the New York Times. The publication writes that in Berlin, they have started talking about the possibility of deploying German soldiers as a part of a European mission after a peace agreement is reached. The Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany hinted at such readiness, and several European Union leaders supported the idea. However, many citizens in Germany itself and even part of Mayor's party met the initiative without much enthusiasm. So, very interesting situation. Now we see that more and more countries are ready to send troops on the territory of Ukraine after the end of the conflict, but we understand that Russia will never accept this situation, and most likely Russia will never end the conflict until there is something like risk or the reality or chances that Western countries will deploy forces without permission from the Russian side. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the situation in the Kherson direction, where the Russians continue creation of a kill zone along the M14 road between the cities of Nikolaev and the city of Kherson. During the previous 12 hours, additional video were published where we can see how a driver was moving along M14 road between the cities of Kherson and the city of Nikolaev, and in this video we can see the consequences of Russian FPV drone attacks. As you can see, lots of vehicles were damaged and destroyed. This is very important video because if we let's say load updates for the 26th of August of 2025, they had another video from the same road, and as you can see, this is just the moment, the first hours or first minutes after Russian attack. And when talking about this video, we have just two vehicles that were damaged and destroyed along the road. And when talking about the video that was published during the previous 12 hours, at the same part of the road we can see at least 4 or 5 vehicles that were damaged and destroyed by Russian FPV drones. Furthermore, several vehicles, most likely that were damaged recently, were removed by Ukrainians. So now we see that by the beginning of the 27th of August of 2025, at least 5 or even 7 vehicles were already destroyed by the armored force of the Russian Federation during the previous night. So we see that this kill zone is intensifying, and the Russians most likely are planning to destroy more and more vehicles, more and more military equipment that goes along these roads with the purpose to reinforce Ukrainian positions on the territory of the city. Maybe this is a part of possible Russian offensive operation in the direction of Kherson. Maybe it's just a media attack with the purpose to force Ukrainians to keep additional forces and reserves in the direction of the city, which will allow the Russians to improve their positions on any other direction, on some other direction. Now let's discuss the situation in the South Donetsk direction, where the Russians continue their offensive operation. During the previous 12 hours, pro-Ukrainian sources published very interesting article regarding the situation in this direction. And according to them, the Russians continue their offensive operation in the western direction, and the Russians currently managed to encircle the settlement by the name of Kamyshevacha. The Ukrainians are expecting that in coming days or even hours, the Russians will begin assault operation. Furthermore, when talking about several pro-Russian resources, they stated that by the morning of the 27th of August of 2025, the Russians already entered the village of Kamyshevacha, and currently there are very heavy clashes for this territory. It seems that during the upcoming 24 hours, the Ukrainians would be forced to fall back. And as we discussed in the previous videos, the Ukrainians most likely would be forced to fall back from all these fields and all these villages, at least until they get additional kill zone area around the settlement of Pokrovsk and the settlement of Gulay Pole. Only inside of these lines the Ukrainians will have more chances to stop and to slow down the Russians, at least with FPV drones. When talking about fields, Ukrainians don't have vehicles, don't have manpower, they don't have anything to stop Russian advance in this direction. The only thing that Ukrainians can do is to slow down the Russians. Anyway, let's wait and see what is going to be next, but we see that the Russians are tasked to take this territory and to get as deep as possible inside of the Zaporozhye region. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Novopavlovka direction. The armed forces of the Russian Federation continue consolidating of their troops on the Ukrainian side of the river of Volcha. During the previous night, several sources reported that Ukrainians from the forest to the north of the village of Filia from this one managed to counterattack Russian positions in the area of the village of Filia and to force the Russians to fall back. The Russians were doing everything they could. They were trying to destroy Ukraine positions in these three lines with aviation, but most likely it didn't help. The Ukrainians, according to information we have, counterattacked and forced the Russians to fall back on the Russian side of the river of Volcha. As of now, we are not adjusting the map because we are waiting for additional geolocations for more reliable proofs, but we will keep this information in our mind. Now let's discuss the situation in the city of Pokrovsk and around the Pokrovsk agglomeration. During the previous 24 hours and during the previous night, we received lots of very interesting updates. And probably the most important video is coming from the most southern part of the city of Pokrovsk, and we're talking about this video. Here we can see how Ukrainians on tank were counter-attacking in the southern part of the city, and right exactly in this moment we can see how Ukrainians were attacking this multiple storage building with a tank within a very short distance until the entire black part of building has been ruined. So this episode took place exactly in this area, and this building was attacked by the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are saying, and the author of this video was saying, that this territory, this building was taken by the Russian soldiers, and Ukrainians were trying to force the Russians to fall back or to bury them under the ruins of the building. Based on this video, we came to the conclusion that everything to the west of this building, everything to the west of the southern Pokrovsk citadel was already taken by the Russians, and we colored these territories in Russian favor. So we see that the Russians have currently very powerful positions, strong positions in the southern part of the city of Pokrovsk, and now the Russians are trying to improve their positions in the area of the Pokrovsk citadel. We are talking about the southern part of the city. In the southeastern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration, very interesting video was published from the area between the villages of Grodovka, Mirolubovka and the Zhuravka River. Here we can see how two Russian soldiers were heading towards these facilities, and these two Russian soldiers were ambushed by Ukrainian sabotage and reconnaissance group. So very interesting episodes, and the most important part is that the Russians, according to this video, were moving from, let's say, the village of Mirolubovka in the direction of these facilities, or maybe the Russians were planning to move even further, but they were ambushed exactly in this point. The Russians, when they were moving along this road, were completely sure that these positions were already under complete Russian control. So it seems that some territories from these positions from the southeastern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration are under complete Russian control, but as for now we don't have enough of proofs to make additional coloring. So we are waiting for additional updates, but it seems that the southeastern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration has already collapsed or about to collapse in coming days or even hours. And additional changes on the ground were recorded in the northern part of the Pokrovsk agglomeration from the city of Rodinska. During the previous 12 hours, several neutral mappers added additional changes on the ground. According to them, the armed forces of the Russian Federation during the previous days managed to improve their positions in the northern and the northeastern part of the city of Rodinska, and the Russians continue advancing. Currently, there are heavy clashes for the settlement of Rodinska because both the Russians and the Ukrainians understand the value of the territory, and if Ukrainians lose control over the Rodinska, most likely the Ukrainians will be forced to move from the entire city and the agglomeration of Pokrovsk. A bit further in the northwestern direction, during the previous days, the Russians destroyed a very important railways bridge that Ukrainians used to supply and support their contingent in the vicinity of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. This bridge was destroyed either by attack of FAB or by another sabotage and reconnaissance group of the armed force of the Russian Federation. So now we understand that logistics of the armed force Ukraine has become a bit poorer in comparison with the previous days. The armed forces of the Russian Federation continue their offensive operation in the direction of the Shakhovo pocket. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded. According to neutral mappers, the Russians took under control some trenches, tree lines and fortifications and strongholds on the line between the settlements of Poltavka, Rusin Yar, Sofiivka, Toretska. So currently, according to neutral mappers, the distance between the edge positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation and first buildings of the settlement of Sofiivka is less than 1.5 kilometers, more precisely 1 kilometer and 370 meters. So the Russians are very close to attack completely to destroy Ukrainian defense in the Shakhovo pocket. As we discussed in the previous videos, if Ukrainians lose the Shakhovo pocket, this can lead to unpredictable consequences to the entire defense line, defense belt of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area. Now let's move further. Let's talk about the Konstantinovka direction. Very interesting video is coming from the settlement of Katerinovka. Today the Russians, the pro-Russian resources published this video where we can see two Russian soldiers in the central part of Katerinovka that were waving with Russian flag. So according to information we have, despite the fact that the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported complete control over the settlement of Katerinovka several days or weeks ago, just today, just by the morning of the 27th of August of 2025, the Russians managed to finish the battle for the territory, to clear the settlement and to secure this area completely. So according to pro-Russian resources, just by the morning of the 27th of August of 2025, the settlement of Katerinovka fell in Russian hands completely. Currently the Russians are about to finish the clearing operation in the area of Kliban-Byk, and then the Russians most likely will move further in the direction of the settlements of Nilipovka and Plishevka, with the purpose to get as close as possible to begin offensive operation in the direction of Konstantinovka from the south. So we believe that in coming months we're going to see lots of updates exactly from the area to the south of the city of Konstantinovka. The Russians need to answer the settlement of Konstantinovka before winter and cold comes. As for the Sivers direction, during the previous 12 hours nothing special happened. Very interesting report is coming from the Liman direction. Several pro-Russian resources, very reliable ones, reported that the Russians began offensive operation from the settlement of Kolodezi in the southern direction, and according to information we have, the Russians are tasked to attack the settlement of Zarechna from the northwest. So basically the Russians are tasked to attack the settlement of Zarechna from behind. This offensive operation at the end can force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area in the western direction towards the city of Liman. So we see that the battle for the city of Liman is entering the decisive phase. As for the northern Kupiansk direction and as for the Sumy direction, nothing special happened during the previous hours. And that's it for the short video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.